Ibrahim al-Hajj, second Baghdad. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I am Amy Goodman. Former Alaska Senator and 2008 presidential candidate Mike Gravel is holding a news conference in New York City today to call for a new independent investigation into 9/11. Gravel will be speaking on behalf of the NYC 9/11 Ballot Initiative Campaign, a grassroots group seeking to place an initiative on the ballot of the November 6th general election, allowing registered New York City voters to create a new commission to investigate 9/11. The group's looking to appoint between 9 and 15 commissioners on the panel to conduct the investigation. Some of the people who've reportedly already agreed to serve as commissioners include Lori Van Auken, a 9/11 widow, one of the so-called Jersey Girls, Lincoln Chafee, the former Republican senator from Rhode Island, Bishop Thomas Gumbleton, a pastor in Detroit, Michigan, as well as former Democratic Senator Mike Gravel, who joins us here today. He's published 3 books this year: Citizen Power, A Mandate for Change, The Kingmakers, How the Media Threatens Our Security and Our Democracy, and A Political Odyssey. His book, A Mandate for Change, Citizen Power, A Mandate for Change, has a foreword by Ralph Nader. He'll be joining us on the show later in the week. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Senator Gravel.
Amy, thank you for having me. But before we launch into the mission of my appearance, I want to comment on this young man you just had on. I got to tell you, the military is in for deep trouble. That this kid felt he wasn't very educated, wasn't a good student. I mean, he's beautifully articulate. But let me tell you one thing, we forget history. The First World War ended because hundreds of thousands of people walked off the battlefield. If we're going to end this war and the strength of the military-industrial complex, it's through courageous young men like this walking away from the stupidity and the immorality of our political leaders who lead us on fool's errands of violence and war. And so I want to applaud what this kid is talking about and his experience. And boy, now that is courage with a capital C. I just wanted to articulate that for you.
Didn't you lead the initiative to end the draft in Vietnam?
Well, yes. Well, I'm very proud. It's one of my accomplishments. I forced it. I forced the end of it. And that, well, it was a 5-month filibuster that Mansfield made possible without anybody realizing it.
Senator Michael Mansfield.
Yes, who was the majority leader at the time, so he bought into it, and I didn't even realize what he was doing. He set up a 2-track system on legislation, so I started in May, and then and of course you were there when Ellsberg, myself, and West at the annual meeting of the Unitarian Universalist had a rollicking good time talking about this whole history, and you moderated it, and I can't tell you, as long as I live, I'll never forget what a wonderful time we had piecing this together, happened.
I was asking you about ending the draft. You're talking about the publication of the Pentagon Papers.
Right, but I got the papers because I was filibustering the draft.
So you went on the floor of the Senate
and tried to filibuster. I failed it because I was too nice to the staff, and so I had to use another device, which was and I was a freshman, so I was chairman of Buildings and Grounds. So I used the precedent, you won't believe, House Un-American Activities Committee, where I could call at a moment's notice a hearing, and as a result of that, turn around and got testimony from a Congressman Dow from New York, Upper New York, who came and testified, and he wanted.
You mean you called an emergency hearing? Just to be clear, you called this man. What was it? Out of bed, and you said, you know, that building you've been asking for. If you come and testify right now about why you need this building, we will commence the hearing. That enabled you to hold the hearing.
That's right, and we held the hearing. And then when he said, I want a federal building, I said, well, I'd love to give you a federal building, but we don't have the money. And the reason why we don't have the money is because we're in Southeast Asia. Now, let me tell you how we got into Southeast Asia. And I started to read the Pentagon Papers. That's how, and then I started sobbing after an hour of reading. I'm dyslexic, so I read terribly.
You had gotten those papers from the Washington Post?
Well, from Ben Begdickian, who had gotten them from Dan Ellsberg, and the Post didn't know that Ben had an extra copy. So Ellsberg had pushed Ben because Ellsberg was very concerned that he couldn't get the papers out.
That the Times wouldn't publish them.
That's right, and nor would the Post any further because of the injunction. And so as it happened, I released the papers about 6, 7, 8 hours before the Supreme Court rendered its decision, and their decision was moot because the world had the papers as a result of what I did that night.
And you ultimately had them published by Beacon Press.
That's right. Courageous Beacon Press, not just Beacon Press, courageous Beacon Press, because nobody would touch it. Nobody would touch it because they were at risk. And poor Beacon Press really suffered from government harassment. And as it turned out, I and Dr. Rotberg could have been prosecuted, but then by that time, Watergate had been exposed, and they weren't going to charge a religion or a sitting senator. And so Dan Ellsberg and I never served a day in jail, and the 3 people within the Justice Department that came after us, they all went to jail. There's some justice someplace.
They were.
They were the Attorney General Mitchell, Mardian, and the other guy, I keep forgetting who his name is.
And of course, the Pentagon Papers were the 7,000 pages of secret history of U.S. involvement in Vietnam that Ellsberg had taken out of a safe. Nothing but history,
nothing but history. This stuff should have never been classified, never been classified. And what I operated on, I'm a lay person, it's just very simple. If it's important for the Secretary of Defense to know how we got into this mess, it's important for the American people to know how we got into this mess. And this is the same situation now we have with Iraq. How did we get there? And now this segs us into this commission here in New York. I view this very, very serious. I don't see the body politic having the guts to go out and make a real new investigation, because the way politicians act, whether it's Democrat or Republican, oh, we'll investigate a little bit, but let's not go too deeply because we got to cover their backside because they'll cover our backside, and it's too political in nature. And so with the commission that we're talking about, 9/11 here in New York City, now that's a commission that's going to be a real commission. And that commission now can make a true investigation as to what happened on 9/11, but not just 9/11, because the war is tied with that. And so this will give us an opportunity to vertically go into all the backup to this data and have subpoena powers to have people testify. Now, if a person perjures themselves here with the New York Commission, it's perjury. So it's a crime, and so maybe this will give us an opportunity to have justice, and we can begin subpoenaing the President of the United States. At that time, he'll be the former president and the vice president, and go on down into the bowels of the intelligence and